1, 2, 3. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Side by Side Australasia. Our show now is going to be called Side by Side Australasia with Dazza and Jezza. Welcome, Jezza.
Hi, thanks, Dazza. This is going to be a regular thing, right?
Yes, it is. We're going to talk about a number of issues. I think we can share experiences about China and about current events in regards to China, which brings us to our topic today. We're going to talk about clean energy issues and carbon neutral issues, and a bit about the European Union's hopeful cooperation with China over these issues, and some of the things I've been interviewing and doing on that. But from a local level, and that's what I want to hear about too, is from a local level, I'd like to hear from you, Jezza. You're on the ground there, on some of the initiatives that are being taken in China, and also how they are viewing going into new clean energies and becoming carbon neutral.
Okay, so before we get going, let's just clarify this one thing. This is side by side with Dazza and Jezza on China. We might mention other countries, but basically you've got knowledge and experience living in China, and I'm living in China. Because of the way that Chinese people the way that Western people in China are often portrayed, we were thinking about calling this like the Wu Mao show or the 50 Cent show, but there's already something that exists, and anybody who's really interested, go online and look up the Wu Mao show. And I do have input into that from time to time. There's a group of us, we're a very flexible group. We're a very fluid group. We sometimes get together online, but we're not we're a network of people without being an organization. And it's run by Fernando, who is known as Furmubi online. And those guys are, including myself, are all very, very experienced China livers or China watchers, geopolitical people. And if you really want insight into what's happening on China, look up the Wu Mao show. And that's the reason why we can't call ourselves the Wu Mao show or the 50 Cent show, because there's a really good show already there called Wu Mao, which means 50 cent in Chinese. It's half of 1 RMB. And apparently it's what people like me get paid for every comment that I make on Chinese news. If I make a positive comment, I get 50 cents for doing so. I don't, but I wish I did, because I'd be quite wealthy now. I tend to have a lot of positive things to say about China, but where there is negativity, I'll point it out quite happily. And contrary to popular opinion, we can contradict inside of China where it's necessary.
I've had that last-ditch comment made at me when either debating an issue with somebody who's very much on the anti-China side. Where I debate on facts, but it comes down to where you present the facts that they can't counter, so they'll call you a Wu Mao.
That's usually when it happens. You're a CCP shill, you're a Wu Mao, now usually the allegations are, I've got a Chinese wife, of course, so I've lived in China now I'm in my 18th year. And so what happens is these guys, when I give them irrefutable evidence, which has been established usually by academics outside of China, because although I do use Chinese sources when I'm researching something, I do use Chinese sources. I always try and find a Western source for the same information, because no one believes what comes out of China. Only 4,800 people died of COVID in China. Yeah. Only 75,000 people caught China, 80,000 now, including all the people who've come in. Yeah, that's actually true. I live in a city of 4 million. I don't know anybody who caught China, caught COVID, let alone died of COVID. There is no one in Zhongshan, the city where I live, who died of COVID. So if there is, I don't know about it. And if I don't know about it, it's because no one's talking about it. If there was more COVID in this city, people would have been talking and I would have known. There's not. So I think those figures, this is just one example. I think the figures that we get out of China are usually accurate. However, I will try and find an alternate source in the West that has academically researched what I'm trying to say. And today we're going to be talking about the the positive things that China are doing in terms of clean energy. And every single thing that I've got here is researchable in the West through Western sources. So let's move on to talk about what we're going to talk about. And the point is that I'd like to make is it's all verifiable. I'm not going to be bringing up statistics and making it confusing for non-academics. I'm not an academic at all. But people like me, when I start seeing academic citations and quotations, it just gets too confusing, and I turn off the brain and stop listening. So all I'm going to do is tell you some anecdotes and tell you, but you can research it yourself. If you think, well, that can't be right, let's go have a look, and you'll find what I'm saying is not only sourced in China, but academically proven outside of China. So let's move on.
Yeah, and you can, if you've got any links that you need me to put below in the comments area, please provide them.
I'd rather not put links. I could give you 100 links, but what I prefer people to do when they're challenging me is do your own research. And if you're going to invest in something, surely you do your own research rather than listen to someone else. And there are tens of millions of dollars being invested inside of China by Western sources, Western organizations. They're doing their own research. They know. So when you see all this negativity about China, when you see what's happening about China, do your own research. Take a look at your own. And I often say this, particularly you're an Australian in Australia. And I say to people in Australia, take a look at the DFAT, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade website. And they'll tell you what's really happening. Don't take a look at the press, because they'll tell you what they want you to hear. Take a look at DFAT, and you'll find that the relationship between China and Australia is nowhere near as bad as you thought it was. The trade is all up. At the moment, the education, I think there's $38 billion a year lost in education because no Chinese students are traveling to Australia. But there's still a lot. I have a former student who was talking to me just a couple of days ago. She's still studying in Australia online from China. So it is happening. It is going on. It's not as bad as people portray. Do your own research. I can give you some links. If someone asks a question, can you link me to that? Because I can't find it. Happy to do so. Yeah.
Okay. I wrote a story on our Energy Minister, Matt Canavan, who come out and said publicly on Q&A, it's an ABC program, why should we be doing stuff on clean energy? Basically, he said like this: why should we be doing stuff on clean energy when China are not doing anything? And
I've heard this same argument before.
Yeah, and that spurred me to write an article on that in the Australian Independent Media Network, examining Matt Canavan's China clean energy cop-out. And basically, China's doing an Inner Mongolia taxonomy incentive for clean energies. They're doing stuff with the Belt and Road issue.
Not just Inner Mongolia, it's everywhere.
Everywhere. So with the Belt and Road issue, when I interviewed the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China vice presidents who are doing a working group on cooperation between the EU and China on clean energy, trying to get that up, and they make reports to the EU, is they said that China is not funding any non-clean energy initiatives in the Belt and Road issue, which is quite a great step. So
it's a little bit further than that. They came out in the last conference that the party held, I think it was April this year. They actually made an announcement that they won't build any coal plants anywhere in the world outside of China. Now, the immediate Western press, they're still going to build in China. They've got 46 coal plants under construction. Yeah, that is true. But they only burn clean coal. Now, clean coal is still not clean. And they are working very, very hard to reduce this. There's 46 plants. But the fact is, they're producing 40% of the world's manufactured products.
That's right.
If America is the biggest polluter in the world, there's no question about it. It has 1/3 the number of people of China, whereas China has 1.4 billion people and produces 40% of the world's goods. Then you start looking at it and say, well, how can China suddenly switch that off?
No,
They can't. It's impossible. Now, they had plans. They're using the plans that they had. But do you know when the green energy processes started in China? Not many people realize this. China has a reputation of being a polluter. There's no problem with that. It was the worst polluter in the world. Now, it still is the worst polluter in the world. I'm not going to argue that point. But it is doing a lot. Do you know when they started the process?
Mm.
There was a thing in 1978 called the Green Wall of China. Have you heard of that?
No, that one I haven't heard.
Okay, not a lot of people do. As Michael Caine might say, not a lot of people know this. And people tell me I sound like Michael Caine when I speak. Now, the Green Wall of China was the reforestation process. When they realized that they chopped down too many trees and there was a bit of a problem with this, and it wasn't a little problem, it was a big problem. They are currently within 44 kilometers of the border of Beijing, sand dunes, desert.
Right.
So they decided a long time ago that they needed to re-green, and they started with this Green Wall of China. And I'm going to ask you a question. How many trees do you think China has planted since they started the Green Wall of China?
I've seen a figure out. I've seen a figure out there in what they call it, the billion tree planting project.
Yeah.
So it'd have to be. Would it be in the billions? Yeah, I don't have the actual exact figure, but I know on hand. But I know that yeah, it's in the billions, and it's a 23% of China. I think they've covered 23% of China with this greening program.
By 2050, the Green Wall will have covered 4 million square kilometers by 2050. It hasn't yet. They have planted 66 billion trees since most of your listeners were born. I mean, let's face it, most of our listeners here were probably born after 1978 when they started this. 66 billion, not million, billion trees. Now, I'm going to ask you another question. A lot of people don't realize how big a billion is. They say, oh, he's a billionaire. Do you know how long it takes you? If you start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, how long will it take you to count to 1 million? Do you know the answer to that?
Oh, I haven't attempted it, but you can give me the answer to that.
11 days. If you count non-stop, don't sleep, don't eat, just count 11 days. How long will it take you to count to 1 billion?
So times that. I'll get my calculator out, but you can tell me.
32 years.
32 years. So can you imagine digging a hole, digging a hole and planting these trees?
66 billion of them.
6 billion of them. And
that means there's a lot of people working on these projects. A lot.
It shows that they've got a motivation to do it. And you were saying earlier about China being, big on the pollution scale in the world, but put that in a per capita sense. In a per population sense. Yeah. Now put that in a per population sense to America and Australia, and I think they're doing a lot better on a per capita level.
Oh, by a factor. I don't even know what the factor is, but it's a big factor. Yeah. In terms of what America is doing, America is producing more energy than it needs, of course. And if you take a look from space and look at the picture of America and the picture of China, you can see Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, Shenzhen. These are very bright cities. Outside of those bright cities, there's dots. In America, there is just bright. The whole thing is bright. Take a look at if you get an opportunity to look at the world aviation map. This is really interesting to watch the world aviation map, where all the planes, you can see them moving around. In America, it's like ants. There's thousands of them. In China, you see some planes, and there's quite a lot because there's a lot of people moving around. The Americans don't catch trains because the trains are too sluggish and slow. They catch planes. So they have to have, for the 300 million people who want to fly, they have to have lots and lots of planes in the air. And China has done something with high-speed rail. And of course, every single thing comes at a cost. And every single article that I read in the West immediately says, but at what cost? China's got 38,000 kilometers of high-speed rail, but at what cost? China has got 66 billion trees, but at what cost? Now, the cost of the trees is an amazing thing that you probably wouldn't think about too much. There's a shortage of water. So planting trees is causing problems with water supply. There's a cost. However, we live in a planet that is 70% water. There are ways that we can overcome that. Desalination plants, you've got them in Australia, they're in the Middle East, they're probably in China too. So it isn't such a big cost. China is putting up wind farms, huge wind farms, but at what cost? Those wind farms actually change the ecology of the environment. They don't pollute, but they do change. That would be a form of pollution. People can say, well, there's a negative to that. And this is what I find when I research anything like this, and I've been looking at things like this, there's always, at what cost? And it's really, it's quite irritating to watch this. You can't see a positive report about what China is doing without the negative that associates with that. If the same thing, America in solar panel, America is the second biggest in the world with, I think, 118, sorry, this is wind power. America is the second biggest in the world with 118 gigawatts of wind power in the United States. The United States and China are roughly the same size, very, very close. If you take Alaska off America, or you take Hawaii off America, or you take Hong Kong and Macau off China, one is bigger than the other one. They're that close in terms of the geographical size. Wind power in China, 282 gigawatts and increasing every single year. America plans to put another 18 gigawatts in next year. China plans to put another 60 gigawatts. They're always bigger, always more of them. So in terms of what they're doing, who has the longest and biggest dam in the world? It used to be America with the Hoover Dam. Now it's China with the Three Gorges Dam. Do you know how much the Three Gorges Dam does? 22.5 gigawatts every year. But at what cost? There was a lot of people had to be rehoused, and there was corruption and there was problems, which is why many people don't realize this. The city of Chongqing, which used to be part of Sichuan, suddenly became a municipality of 32 million people so that it could manage this without going through provincial government coffers, and some of the money was getting siphoned off by corrupt government officials at every level. Yes, at the lowest village level all the way up to the provincial head.
Corruption's everywhere in the world, and you can't just put a monopoly on one country on dealing with issues of corruption. We just had the New South Wales Premier in Australia resign.
I saw that, yeah.
ICAC are doing a corruption investigation on her. And it's for an issue what we call pork barrelling, which apparently is when you're throwing money into it. You're not throwing money into areas of need. You're throwing money in areas where you want to pull votes out of. It's like a form of bribery. And Gladys Berejiklian, who's New South Wales Premier, was caught on the phone with one of her members of Parliament. She had a personal relationship with Darryl Maguire, saying, oh, with Wagga Wagga, we need to build this, because I want to get votes. She goes, I'll throw money at it. Just throw the money at it.
Yeah, and so she got caught. You mentioned ICAC, and some of your listeners wouldn't know what ICAC is, the Independent Commission Against Corruption or Crime? I'm not sure.
Corruption.
Corruption. Okay, so you have an ICAC in every state of Australia and territory, right?
Yeah, we have a federal ICAC that can cover every state.
You don't have a federal ICAC.
Sorry, state ICAC in every state.
Yeah, you don't have a federal ICAC. So apparently it's okay for your federal government to be corrupt, but not your state government.
That's a point. Sorry, I remiss. Yes, we do have it on the state level, but the federal government has been very slow and doesn't want to set up any real independent ICAC or investigation on corruption in the current federal government.
I think you're being very polite there when you say they've been very slow. They haven't done it. That's not slow.
They've been resistant.
That's right. That's a very different thing to going slowly on this. They haven't done it.
Resistant.
And after 120 years of federation, you don't have an independent body to stamp out corruption. I can assure you they do in China.
And that's why there's been a lot of capturing of corrupt officials, and some of those people are corrupt. Sorry, corrupt officials and corrupt business people. And some of those people have escaped to Western countries and said, "Oh, poor me, I'm being persecuted by China," when in actual fact they're most likely they're up on corruption charges. Getting back to our discussion,
clean energy.
Clean energy. So all these initiatives from China that they're doing with clean energy, the trees, everything in the will is there to do it, and that's
not just the will. They're throwing money at this at the same time.
There's a lack of political will from our Prime Minister Scott Morrison to get onto this, where the Glasgow conference has come up on tackling climate change, where he for a long time said he's not going, he doesn't want to be on that, and when the Queen and when Prince Charles chastised him on the media in their polite way about it, he decided to bow to them and do something. And then so he says, "I'm going." So he's like that young kid who hasn't done his homework, and at the last 2 years he's got to catch up to have something to take to Glasgow. And he come out with his little blue book.
I saw the brochure,
4 pages or 3 pages. I know it was very thin little book on his plan. And the media's looked into it and said, "There's nothing new here. It's just statistics, and it's just what we call
the policy. What's the strategy?"
Yeah.
Well, and this is why I think he didn't want to go to Glasgow. And Xi Jinping is not going to Glasgow, but Xi Jinping hasn't left China in 2 years. He's being very careful about COVID. And Glasgow, Scotland, is the worst country in Europe. Now, I remember someone once saying, when Britain leaves Europe, they won't be able to play in the European Cup. No. Britain's still in Europe. It's not in the EU anymore. It's still in Europe. It hasn't geographically changed. Scotland, I believe, has the highest COVID cases in Europe per capita. Now, that's a problem. Why would you send someone like Xi Jinping? Why would he go to somewhere like that if there is a danger? Now, I heard yesterday, I don't know if this is true, I heard Keir Starmer has got COVID now. Now, we know Boris Johnson got it last year. I don't know if this is true, but I heard Keir Starmer now has tested positive for COVID. If you can't stop, President Trump got it, Boris Johnson got it, Keir Starmer has it. You can't stop the leader of a country, or the deputy leader, or the opposition leader of a country. You can't stop these people catching COVID. How are you going to protect someone like Xi Jinping from this? You can't wear a big hazmat suit.
The big difference between Xi Jinping and Scott Morrison is that Xi Jinping and his country have done their homework on tackling climate change.
And tackling COVID.
And they've got a structure to do it. Is where, if I just put this in, I don't like talking too much about domestic politics, is when Australia was burning with bushfires and national disaster, Scott Morrison went on a holiday to Hawaii. And then when he came back...
His kids needed a holiday.
That's an excuse. He came back and the media said, "Why did you do that?" And instead of saying, "Sorry, it was a misstep," or taking some accountability, he threw his kids under the bus saying, "Oh, my kids needed a holiday." But getting back to that, so Xi Jinping is actually doing something about it.
Actually, that is something I will link you to at the end of this. Do you know that there is an English language version of China's white paper? China's white paper forms the basis of what Xi Jinping will present at COP. And this is the basis of it. Now, obviously, he's making a speech where he will actually itemize some of the things China has done. And in fact, I've got notes in front of me here. I could actually have written his speech for him because of what I've got here, what China has done. But what China, much more importantly, what China is going to do. Now, so far, historically, since Xi Jinping came in, almost every target that has been set has been met well within. They reached the target. It wasn't China's target. It was a global target for reduction of poverty, and China did it 10 years early. They did it before they said they were going to do it. Now, let's do another one on poverty alleviation in the future. We won't go into it this time because I do have a lot of input into poverty alleviation, but we're talking not about poverty, not about COVID, about climate change here. Everything that China does, it does it before the deadline it sets itself, and currently it's targeted to peak at 2030. Now, people can say, but China's still building coal. Yes, China is still building coal power stations. Yes, they have no choice because they can't get the technology up and running fast enough for alternatives. So they are still building what they're using, but they are scheduled to peak at 2030. And then from 2030, go carbon neutral by 2050. Yeah. And they have a plan and they have a strategy, and we will see that at COP. What Scott Morrison has and what Boris Johnson has is a brochure, a leaflet that says, yeah, we're going to do it. We haven't really worked it out. In fact, one of the comments in there was undiscovered technology is going to be used to bring us down to by 2050. Okay, so what undiscovered technology have you got in mind? Because it's undiscovered. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to achieve that? Now, what Xi Jinping is going to present, and I guarantee this is going to happen, he will present real targets, real goals through a real strategy. And we're already seeing it in China. Now, you will have heard about the power shortages, power outages. There's a whole bunch of reasons why power was being rationed in some areas and it was going out in others. As far as I know, there was never an unscheduled power outage anywhere. So people were warned. A couple of weeks ago, one of my friends who lives not far from me said, are you going to have power tomorrow? And I said, as far as I know, I don't know, it's tomorrow. And he said, well, I've got a message to tell me that my power is going to be off from 9 in the morning until 11 at night because they're going to do some maintenance. They sent that to every user. Now, factories in Guangdong are being told you can only operate 4 days a week. But you can operate 24 hours on those 4 days a week. Can I make a
comment on that? Sorry, yeah. While you're on that topic, here in Victoria, we had power outage days. We had power outage days during the summer last year. We got text messages. This day is going to be a power outage day for you.
Right.
Which was off, and we've had it. And
the reason it went off here was not about a power outage. It was maintenance on a transformer. Exactly. A transformer needed to be changed. So that was not an unscheduled power outage. We've run out of power. Sorry, we can't provide any. No, they planned maintenance on a transformer. The transformer was only powering, it was one block. It's actually less than a kilometer. He came around here and we had coffee during the day, and he went home at 9 o'clock and he called me up and said, I've got power back. They came back a bit early. But there is outages in some areas, but as far as I'm aware, they are planned outages, they are programmed outages, and the factories are rationed effectively to 4 days a week in Guangdong. I'm not sure about other provinces, but what they're doing to overcome this, they're buying diesel generators. Diesel generators are pumping out carbon into the atmosphere, so it's kind of self-defeating, isn't it?
I think what they should do as a government, if they're going to do those planned outages, give incentives to, and this is a suggestion, give incentives for them to use clean ways to get over that. And I think there's probably some areas where in this transition, they will be probably coming up with some new ideas of how to do that and how to make that transition from, and look, Europe, I was going to say, Europe has done well. Spain has closed down their last coal plant, but they're a smaller country, smaller population. Without the pressure.
Spain's not a small country. I've driven across it. I can assure you it's not small.
China.
Yeah. Okay.
So, so in that regard, there's some more work China's going to do. But the one thing they're doing is saying, we will peak it at 2030, like you said. We're giving you managed expectations, not Scotty from marketing, who's our Prime Minister in Australia, who says he's going to do things, the checks in the mail, and they don't happen. But they're managing expectations. Like 2030, we will do this. And then up to then, and I think they got the 2060 target from there, we will do this. And Europe's is 2050 target because so they're doing that. And the main thing is that I want to get into is this issue, and I'll talk about it for a minute, is the cooperation between Europe and China. They are on the same landmass, as I've mentioned to you before in other discussions. carbon emissions don't have a passport.
No,
and they move
travel
across.
through the air. Yeah.
Yeah. So continental Europe and China need to really cooperate on a joint effort, and with the Belt and Road Initiative and other things. The sticking point, like there's normal little sticking points that you can sort out about structures and logistics of how you put things in place with clean energy in China and now the Belt and Road Initiative. Those things you can work through. But the major sticking point is that the European Union have not signed the comprehensive agreement on investments. I'm going to get into this because China had a response to some of their member people or their member states people who were calling for sanctions against China on Xinjiang and were doing those accusations about abuse in Xinjiang, which you and I have gone into, and we know a lot of those have been debunked, those claims, and there's no real evidence. And I sent an email because I did a interview with the two vice presidents from the European Union of Chamber of Commerce in China who are setting up working groups in China on clean energy to advise the European Union about cooperation. And I did a follow-up email to, and I'll get her name right here, and I've got to get that last name, is Miriam Garcia Ferreira, who is the spokesperson on trade and agriculture within the EU. I sent her an email asking a basic question, was that she sent me an email first as response to my email saying that it is regrettable that China's taken action on these individuals, or a response, I call it, not reaction, a response to these individuals, and alluding to that's the fact why they can't sign the comprehensive agreement on investments with China. So I put back to her and I sent her one of my articles blog articles, which I, like yourself, we debunk a lot of these issues. And I said in my response and a question to her, in the context of not having enough evidence beyond reasonable doubt on these claims these people are calling sanctions for on China, is this worthy to support from the European Union standpoint? Is this worthy to support these claims and not signing an agreement to put at threat cooperation between EU and China on crucial investments to tackle climate change with clean energy, to put that at threat because of claims made not beyond a reasonable doubt.
Not even not beyond a reasonable doubt, Dazza. These claims are uncorroborated allegations which have reasonable doubt. The allegations have doubt, not that they're saying there's proof beyond reasonable doubt, which is what you need, but the allegations have reasonable doubt. And probably today's not the forum for us to go on to Xinjiang. No. I've traveled through Xinjiang several times. I've cycled through Xinjiang twice. And so I do know Xinjiang pretty well. I know that there is no oppression, there is no persecution, there's no genocide, whatever you like to call it. So let's move on from that. And what these people have done is effectively placed a caveat on doing business with an entire country on the basis of unsupported allegations. And not even unsupported, that's not the right word. These not just unsupported, but very, very dubious allegations once investigated. And I think anybody who investigates critically will find the same thing. This is not what should be stopping the future. Now, having said that, you said that they haven't signed an agreement. That doesn't seem to stop China doing what it does anyway. Now, there's a lot of talk about China's debt diplomacy, where they force people into debt. That's also been debunked. When China goes into a country and does a deal, the deal will now be built around clean energy, whatever the deal is. If you're going in for a mine, it will be there's no such thing as a clean mine, but it'll be a cleanest possible mine, cleanest technology mine that you have. If you're building a port, do you know that China now has one carbon neutral port, just opened a couple of weeks ago? The only port in the world that is carbon neutral. and I believe it has 9 employees.
Mm.
And we're talking about a port that moves thousands of containers a day, has 9 employees, and is carbon neutral. So they've already got started on stuff like this. When they manage port, take a look at there's a port in Greece. Take a look, do some research on this one. There's a port in Greece which has gone from bankruptcy to solvency, and the Greek government are incurring income. They're getting income from something that they couldn't manage. Now it's being managed by China. Very same thing happened, and people are immediately point out, what about Sri Lanka? The Sri Lankan port was built with Chinese money. It was an investment. China holds 4% of Sri Lanka's overall debt. This is not debt diplomacy. The IMF go in there with massive amounts of debt. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank are locking Sri Lanka into political changes in order to manage their debt. China just says, okay, well, since you can't pay that debt, we'll take over the port and we'll lease it from you. We will pay you a fee so you can pay the debt. Sri Lanka is actually better off with China managing that port that China built. Now, you could talk about that's China's expansion, but it's not military at all. There is no military capacity in that port. It's a port that takes containers, and Sri Lanka can now become a container hub. So ships going in there can drop off containers. Other ships can pick up containers and go somewhere else. China becomes what Singapore and Hong Kong used to. Sri Lanka becomes what Singapore and Hong Kong used to be for the Indian subcontinent. It's a good thing. It's a positive thing. All of these debt diplomacy traps or debt traps have been debunked because what China is.
I'll tell you one thing on that. Sorry, I want to get on that one. Yeah. Is that China has renegotiated their loans and forgiven loans along the way. And that was
billions in Africa, yeah,
billions in Africa. And we forget that. The IMF or the World Bank have hardly ever done that. I don't think at all.
In fairness, there's been some debt relief.
My thing is, I think they did it once, but you might be able to correct me on that.
I've seen they have done it. I'm not sure how many times. I haven't researched it, but there has been debt, particularly with COVID. What we now call the global south, which we used to call the third world. If you take a look at where the third world and the global south are, they are the poorest countries in the world, and they're mostly in Asia, Africa, and South America. Mm. And with the exception, I think, of one country, Thailand, every single one of them has been colonized by a Western power. Now, if that's the case, the Western powers, I want to ask, let's put a little scenario here. France has no gold inside of France. There is no gold resources inside of France. Yeah. Yet France is the 3rd biggest holder of gold reserves in the world. Yeah. How is that possible when the countries that it managed are poor, desperately poor? Guess which country has the 10th largest gold reserves in the world? Mali. Who was the colonial power in Mali until the 1960s? France. What's France got under its central bank? Massive reserves of gold. What's Mali got? Poverty.
Exactly.
Something went wrong there. So don't come and argue, and you won't, but other people will come and argue, but debt. Don't do that to me, because I will throw back statistics that prove the world is better off with China and is worse off with colonialism. Always.
And every country's got debt. But what we're talking about a lot is the immediate threat of climate change. Now, with China saying that we will invest in clean energies in the Belt and Road Initiative, that's a massive, great opportunity for, and I want to talk about this, is a massive, great opportunity for Africa. It's a great opportunity for all their Belt and Road countries. I also think, and you've looked at the poverty alleviation side, I think there's a lot of great technologies that can benefit countries that don't have a good sanitary sanitizing infrastructure. I think things like, I've seen one of them in Vienna where they had used raw sewage to generate electricity. I think there'll be great sanitized infrastructure projects for rural parts of China, and for other places in the Belt and Road Initiative. So there's nothing but opportunities.
Yes.
And
positive. Yeah, I did look at that. We
not negativity where they say not negativity where they say, oh, at a cost.
It's always got a cost. The villages in China have exactly this. In the past, in 2014, I did some cycling in China, and I went from the east to the west and through central China. Pretty much every town, rural town you come to, you find that just outside the town there is a waste disposal place, and literally it is just a pit. And once a week, someone comes and pours some fuel over it, sets fire to it, and that's what happened. That's 2014. That's only 7 years ago. I went through the same region, and I've been through the same region a few times, and I can't find these things now. What's happening is that it's being taken away and put into these compressors. The compressors take it off to somewhere else, and it's creating gas, and it's creating, it's being burnt. Yes, in some places it's still being burned. And this is part of what we're doing, but it's being burned in a more controlled way with carbon capture. That's something that people don't really realize. How do you get rid of 1.4 billion people's garbage? You've got to put it somewhere, and you've got to do something with it. They used to just put it into these pits and burn it, and that was obviously bad. Now they're controlling that. So small villages have their own sewage, garbage, recycling places. And it's actually happening. Recycling, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but it's certainly a better system of management than it used to be in every single village in China. Every village in China now has a road going into it, now has a proper waste disposal management system. Every village.
Sorry, Jerry, at what cost, mate? At what cost?
That's a good question, yeah.
At what cost? I mean,
well, you could walk around, you could drive around China, and you could go to every village and say, look, this is a village that's burning its garbage, and this is the pollutant that's coming out of it, and get the statistics and say, there's the cost. The fact is, it's better than it used to be. The fact is, it will become better again still in the near future. By 2050, I don't know if I'll be around in 2050 because I'm 63 now, but it's 30 years away. By the time I'm 100 years old, I would say it's already happening. Blue skies everywhere. I look out now, out of my window. It's bright, it's sunny, blue skies. When I came to China in 2004, I can remember I'd been here for 3 months, and I was heading back to Australia for, I arrived in October, and in February, I had a month's holiday with Chinese New Year, so I thought I'll go home. Back then, Australia was still home to me. It's not now. But I remember talking to the principal of the school I was working. He said, I'm really sorry that you haven't seen much sunlight. It's been overcast all the time you're here. And I looked up, it was overcast. Is that the word you use? And we were breathing in fumes that tasted of lead and metal and poisons. And it really was, 2004, a very bad environment to live in. Now, blue skies everywhere. Even Beijing has blue skies.
I know it's a change because I was in Beijing about 2007, and it was smoggy then. But then I've been back, and it's improved. And the whole thing is, but we've got to see positive opportunities.
Okay.
Running down China at what cost, and all this stuff is not going to help tackle climate change on a cooperative level around the world. And that is why my point in the question to the EU was, you allowing this issue to get in the way of one of the biggest threats that we've got in the world in cooperation, joint cooperation, which could bring down the CO2 emissions greatly. Yeah, they're getting done already by China and by Europe, but if you cooperate, even more enhanced and in a systemized way together, you're putting this issue, what we said, that doesn't have any real credibility at all, or any credibility, at the expense of tackling the greatest threat the world has seen. This, to me, is a very, very messed up situation of priorities.
Yes, but it's not about what cost. Whatever the European Union decides to do in relation to sharing this problem and caring about our environment, China is already doing. So I hope that this next few days with the COP thing going on, once people start to see that China not only has a goal, but it has a strategy to reach that goal, and it has punishments inside of that strategy. There are sanctions and punishments. It's written into the white paper. I'll send you a link to it, and you'll be able to read it. It's not that extensive. It's quite an easy read, actually. It's quite good. And what you'll see there is that, or what I hope we'll see, is that once the world through COP realizes that China is actually really doing something, there's going to be the negativity, but at what a cost? I mean, what is the cost to any changes? There's always some impact, and whether that impact be social, financial, it doesn't matter. There is an impact, but it is definitely happening. Here's the thing. Do you know which country has the most electric vehicles in the world?
China.
By 2030, 40% of all the vehicles, 2030 is only 7 years away, all the vehicles in China are going to be electric. 40% of the vehicles.
And with that though, that still comes off the back of electricity generated by coal. But the next step is for China to make that transition to the clean energies generated, which feeds to those clean energy cars.
They are by a long way. They are double the amount of solar than the next country, which is the USA. Double the amount. Now, they're more than double if you count, much more than double, if you count solar water heating. Everywhere you go in China, on the roof, you'll see a solar panel. Everywhere. Not every roof. I don't have one here, and I don't have access to my roof, and I would like to, but I don't have access, so I can't. There's an apartment between me and the roof, and that's the only way through their apartment. So for me, I live in a very old style building, and it's awkward. But the building that I used to live in had solar panels on the roof. The building that my father-in-law and mother-in-law live in has solar panels on the roof. Now, if you just take water heating, solar water heating, and you add that to the amount of solar generated, photovoltaic solar generating, you've got more than 500 gigawatts, which is triple what the rest of the world has. 118 is in America, so we're 500 and something in China. So we're close to triple what America's got, and America's number 2. Take a look at wind. China is by far away the biggest in wind. So I've been out to Gansu and Xinjiang, and I cycled through this wind farm, and it took 2 days. I mean, not kidding you, it took 2 days to cycle through this wind farm. It's so big. And we're cycling at 20 kilometers an hour for 4 or 5 hours a day. We're talking about hundreds of kilometers of wind farm, literally hundreds of kilometers. Yes, what cost? Those blades, those turbines, those masts that they go on, they all have to be made. They all have to be transported out there. Yes, there is a short-term cost impact on wind, and wind is not that efficient. Sometimes it blows too hard, sometimes it doesn't blow enough, and sometimes it changes the local ecology and the local conditions to the point where people say, I have to move out of here. But do you know what they're doing underneath the wind farms? Do you know what they're doing underneath the solar panels? They're planting stuff. So they're using the land double use. I don't know if that's happening elsewhere, but that is an actual fact. So part of Gansu has a 5 or 6 kilometer long solar farm, and underneath the solar panels used to be desert. Now it's not, because it's getting the shade that it needs in order for plants to be able to be grown. Now, there's certain plants you can't grow and certain plants you can grow, and there's some issues about what the soil is, but they've got scientists working on that stuff. So are they doing things? Absolutely, yes. They are doing things.
And this brings me to my final point, and we'll wrap up, is that Scott Morrison will be going to Glasgow with his little thin blue book, the statistics, and he'll be out of step with China and even out of step with Europe, to that matter.
I think he's going to be called out on it. I think that's why he didn't want to go. I think he will be called out on it.
He'll be called out. So, from an Australian's perspective, who point their fingers at China all the time, the government here, and criticise them, he's going to be caught with his pants down. And I will await that response from the European Union.
Yeah.
And I want to bring that probably next time we talk. I'll bring that response, because there'll be a crucial to that response, knowing how they're going to prioritise good cooperation on clean energy with China and show their goodwill intent to do something. The ball's in their court on that. And also that link you talked about, the white paper, I will put it in below.
Put that one in the description. One last thing that China is doing that people don't know about. One last thing before we sign off, and we will keep these under an hour every time, okay? Yeah. Electric ships. China has electric ships. And not only electric ships, but if you want to go for a cruise on the Pearl River and go and see the beautiful lights of Guangzhou at night, first of all, the lights are going to be switched off at a certain time now, not left on all night. So they're saving energy in that respect. The lights are not on for certain times of the day, so they're saving energy there. If you want to go on one of these nice dinner riverboat cruises, and you can do so on an electric ship now, an electric boat will take you up and down. But there's also, I think there's only one in the world, an electric container ship. I don't think it's Chinese, but the technology is, and I think it was partly built in China. I've got a feeling it's a European country that's experimenting with it. It might be Denmark or Sweden or Norway. One of the northern European countries has an electric ship, and some of the technology on that ship, container ship, came from China. And of course, because it's electric and it's at sea, it's solar powered. It's got solar power, it's got batteries, it's got everything you need to get from one end of the world to the other. Pretty good, pretty impressive.
So that brings me to the final point where China is not a threat to the world. They are a partner to cooperate with on tackling one of our world's biggest threats. And
China keeps telling the world this, and the world keeps saying, "Yeah, but we don't believe you."
Yeah, and you know, they see, and China could give Australia advice, could give Scotty from marketing advice here in Australia about what to do. We share knowledge for the greater good, and I think that's what a lot of the Western world is forgetting in its view on China and its way it approaches China.
Yeah, the rest of the world needs to look at the threat of China, which is what people keep talking about. China's expansion, China's military expansion. Now it has the biggest navy in the world. The size of its ships are defensive. They're not aggressive. Right. China's ships are not going to go elsewhere. China's economic expansion. When countries are signing deals with China, it's benefiting both. When colonialist countries go to China, go to Africa or South America or Asia, they basically pillage that country. They pillage and take what they can.
In South America, they poison and pillage. The US have a long-standing history of poisoning South America with toxic chemicals in the factories they built there, and they've had a long-standing history.
And then using the law. I mean, I've been following the Dazza case. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. The Steve Dazza, who is the lawyer who is starting a 6-month prison sentence yesterday for challenging Chevron, for having the temerity to challenging Chevron after they were found guilty of polluting and challenging their appeal. So he's now in prison for doing that. I've been following Julian Assange. I've been following things like that. It seems that anybody who tells the truth about what America is doing is subject to all kinds of litigative problems.
And we're talking about truth with evidence, not with speculation and not with no evidence. And that is what's stopping, and we'll wrap it up now, I think. Yeah. That is what's stopping the cooperation between the EU and China on
one word. Evidence.
Evidence.
We have evidence that China is doing great things. People don't have evidence that China is doing evil things. Evidence is the word. That's the word of the day.
That's a great way to wrap it up.
That great word. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Jezza.
No problem, Dazza. It's great to catch up with you again, and we will be doing this regularly. It's going to be fun.
And can people support us? Hit the subscribe button. Yeah. Share our discussions and our YouTube link with others, because we want to have a world that talks and has dialogue, not confrontation and war. So thank you again, Jezza.
No problem.
Enjoy your day, and
will do.
All right. Bye, mate.
Bye-bye.